The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a sound like thunder rolling across distant mountains. Ambassador David Cross stepped into the vast hall, his footsteps echoing in the silence that had fallen over hundreds of alien representatives. The chamber stretched upward for what seemed like miles, its crystalline walls reflecting the bioluminescent glow of countless species gathered in judgment. Cross had prepared for this moment his entire life, but nothing could have readied him for the overwhelming presence of galactic power, concentrated in one space. Above him, floating platforms held beings that defied description. Tentacled creatures with eyes like burning stars. Insectoid forms that clicked and buzzed in languages older than human civilization. Crystalline entities that refracted light into patterns that hurt to look at directly. At the highest point of the chamber sat Prime Chancellor Valerix, a being whose very presence seemed to bend space around him. His forearms ended in claws that could crush steel, while his head bore ridges that glowed with internal fire. When he spoke, his voice boomed from speakers embedded in the walls themselves. "Human representative," Valerix announced, his words causing lesser aliens to shrink back in their seats. "You stand before the Galactic Council accused of the most serious crime, known to civilize space unauthorized, expansion beyond your designated zone." Cross felt the weight of 10,000 eyes upon him as he walked toward the central platform. Earth's diplomatic team had warned him this would happen eventually. Humanity had been granted a small corner of space 50 years ago, when they first achieved faster-than-light travel. They were supposed to stay there, grateful for the privilege of existing under Council protection. But humans had always been terrible at following orders. "Chancellor Valerix," Cross replied, his voice steady despite the intimidating surroundings. "I stand before you not as an accused criminal, but as the representative of a free species." A ripple of what could only be called shock ran through the assembled aliens. Several smaller creatures actually fell from their perches, while others began making sounds that their translation devices couldn't process. Never in the Council's 3,000-year history had a restricted species spoken with such boldness. The Hive Lord of the Zenthari Empire, a massive creature composed of what looked like living metal, leaned forward. "Free species? Human, you exist at our sufferance. Your worlds survive because we allow them to survive. Your ships fly because we permit them to fly." Cross smiled, and that simple human expression caused another wave of confusion through the chamber. "That's interesting, Hive Lord. Because according to our records, none of your patrol ships have been able to locate our new colonies for the past 6 months." The chamber erupted into chaos. Alien voices rose in a cacophony of clicks, roars, and electronic sounds as representatives demanded explanations from their military advisors. Cross stood calmly in the center of it all, waiting for the storm to pass. Chancellor Valerix slammed his ceremonial staff against the floor, creating a sound like a supernova explosion. Silence returned instantly. "Explain yourself, human." "Gladly," Cross said, reaching into his diplomatic pouch. The movement caused every security system in the chamber to activate, but what he withdrew wasn't a weapon. It was a small device that projected holographic images into the air above him. The images showed star charts, but not any that the Council recognized. These depicted systems beyond the edge of known space, worlds that their surveys had declared uninhabitable or impossible to reach. Yet the holograms clearly showed thriving human colonies, massive orbital stations, and ships unlike anything in the Council's database. "While your species have spent millennia mapping the galaxy according to your limitations," Cross continued, "humans have been asking a different question. What if the impossible is just another problem to solve?" Admiral Thexis of the Signan Republic, her serpentine body coiled around her command platform, hissed in disbelief. "Those systems are death traps. Radiation levels that would kill any known life form, gravitational anomalies that tear ships apart, asteroid fields so dense that navigation is impossible." "For your technology, yes," Cross agreed. "But humans have always specialized in adaptation. When we couldn't breathe underwater, we built submarines. When we couldn't fly, we built aircraft. When we couldn't survive in those systems, we built better ships and better people." The hologram shifted to show close-up images of human colonies thriving in conditions that should have been lethal. Humans walking unprotected on worlds bathed in deadly radiation, their skin glowing with an inner light that suggested biological modification, ships phasing through solid matter as if it weren't there. Entire cities existing in the heart of gravity wells that should have crushed them flat. Impossible, whispered the crystal speaker of the luminous collective, her voice like wind chimes in a storm. The energy requirements alone are considerable, Cross admitted. Which is why we've been developing new energy sources. Tell me, when was the last time any of your species discovered a new form of physics? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The assembled representatives looked at each other with what humans might have recognized as uncertainty. For creatures accustomed to absolute technological superiority, the concept of being surpassed was almost incomprehensible. Chancellor Valorix's ridges began glowing brighter. Even if this display is genuine, you remain vastly outnumbered. The Council commands the loyalty of over 2,000 species across 1 million worlds. Your entire civilization consists of perhaps a dozen planets. Cross's smile widened. You're thinking in terms of numbers, Chancellor. But wars aren't won by whoever has the most ships. They're won by whoever has the better strategy. You speak of war? The voice came from General Korath of the Iron Hegemony, a cybernetic being whose very presence radiated military might. Against the combined forces of the galaxy? Actually, Cross said, checking a device on his wrist, I speak of a war that began 3 hours ago. The chamber's main display suddenly activated without authorization, showing real-time images from across Council space. But these weren't images of peaceful star systems going about their daily business. These were scenes of chaos. Orbital defense platforms going dark, communication networks failing, and most shocking of all, entire patrol fleets simply vanishing from sensor screens. What sorcery is this? Demanded the Voidwalker of the Shadow Realm, its form flickering between dimensions. Not sorcery, Cross replied calmly. Strategy. While you've all been focused on maintaining control through overwhelming force, humans have been developing ways to make force irrelevant. The images continued to stream in, each one more impossible than the last. Human ships appearing inside heavily defended systems without triggering any alarms. Weapons that seemed to fire backwards through time to hit their targets before they were fired. Defense networks turning against their own forces as if commanded by invisible hands. You see, Cross continued as the alien representatives watched their military superiority crumble in real time. The Council made one fundamental error in your calculations about humanity. What error? Chancellor Valorix's voice had dropped to barely a whisper. Cross looked directly at the most powerful being in the galaxy and spoke words that would echo through history. You assumed that because we were the newest species to reach the stars, we were also the weakest. But we weren't late to the party, Chancellor. We were just taking our time to prepare for it. The displays showed one final image, Earth itself. No longer the primitive world the Council remembered, but transformed into something that defied understanding. The planet pulsed with energy that registered on sensors as both matter and pure thought, surrounded by structures that existed in more dimensions than most species could perceive. Earth formally declares independence from Council authority, Cross announced, and we're prepared to help any other species that wants to join us in building something better than this empire of fear. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of Cross's footsteps as he turned and walked toward the chamber's exit. Where are you going? Chancellor Valorix called after him. Cross paused at the doorway. Home, Chancellor, to prepare for the future. As the doors closed behind him, the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in stunned silence, watching their 1,000-year reign begin to crumble around them. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been in continuous operation for 18 hours, and the mood in the Great Chamber had shifted from outrage to something approaching panic. Chancellor Valorix stood at the center of the command platform, his forearms gesturing frantically as he tried to make sense of reports flooding in from across Council space. Status report from all sectors, he demanded, his voice echoing off the crystalline walls. Admiral Thexus uncoiled herself from her command station, her serpentine form trembling with barely controlled fury. Sector 7 has gone completely dark. 43 patrol fleets gone without a trace. No distress signals, no wreckage, no evidence they ever existed. The crystal speaker's form flickered with distressed patterns. Sector 12 reports similar losses. Our monitoring stations are detecting ships that appear for microseconds before vanishing again. It's as if they exist between moments. General Korath's cybernetic eye glowed red as he accessed his military networks. The humans aren't just attacking our forces. They're making them disappear. High tactical computers can't even theorize how they're doing it. Chancellor Valorix felt the weight of 3,000 years of galactic dominance pressing down on his shoulders. The Council had faced rebellions before, species that had tried to resist their authority. But those conflicts had followed predictable patterns. Fleets met in space, superior numbers and technology prevailed, order was restored. This was something entirely different. "Bring up the tactical display," he ordered. The chamber's massive holographic projector activated, showing a three-dimensional map of Council space. What they saw defied everything they thought they knew about warfare. Red indicators marked where human forces had struck, but the pattern made no sense. The attacks weren't following any logical military strategy. They were happening everywhere at once, targeting seemingly random installations with surgical precision. "They're not trying to conquer territory," observed the Hive Lord, its metal form reflecting the red warning lights. "They're dismantling our infrastructure piece by piece, but how?" demanded the Voidwalker. "Our intelligence reports indicate humanity has perhaps 50 ships capable of interstellar combat. We have over 2 million. The answer came from an unexpected source. Professor Malik, the human xenobiologist who had been studying under Council auspices for the past decade, stepped forward from the observer's gallery. His presence in the chamber had been forgotten in the chaos, making his sudden movement all the more startling. "May I speak, Chancellor?" Malik asked politely. Valorix's ridges flared with anger. "You dare—" "Please," Malik interrupted gently. "I can explain what you're seeing." The chamber fell silent. Every alien eye focused on the human scientist who had worked alongside them for years, learning their secrets while apparently hiding his own. "You're thinking about this conflict in terms of traditional warfare," Malik continued, walking slowly toward the center of the chamber. "Ships versus ships, weapons versus shields, force versus force. But humans stopped thinking that way a long time ago." He gestured to the tactical display. "You see random attacks. We see a carefully orchestrated symphony. Every installation we've targeted serves a specific purpose in your command and control network. We're not trying to defeat your military, we're trying to free it." "Free it?" General Korath's mechanical voice carried a note of confusion. Malik nodded. "Tell me, General, when was the last time you spoke directly to one of your own soldiers? Not through command channels or military protocols, but actually spoke to them as a person?" The question caught Korath off guard. "I don't understand the relevance because your entire military structure is based on fear," Malik explained. "Fear of punishment, fear of failure, fear of questioning orders. Your soldiers follow commands not because they believe in them, but because they're terrified of what happens if they don't." The tactical display suddenly changed, showing something that made every council member lean forward in shock. Where red indicators had marked destroyed installations, new signals were appearing, but these weren't human ships. These were council vessels broadcasting surrender signals and requesting asylum. "Impossible," Admiral Thexis hissed. "Our crews would never." "Your crews are doing exactly what any rational being would do when given a choice," Malik interrupted. "We're not destroying your ships, Admiral. We're offering your people a way out." The displays showed the impossible reality. Entire council fleets changing sides, not through conquest, but through conversion. Human vessels were somehow making contact with individual alien soldiers, showing them something that made them choose humanity over their own empires. "What are you showing them?" Chancellor Valorix demanded. Malik smiled sadly. "The truth. What their lives could be like without fear. What the galaxy could become without the Council's iron fist holding everyone down." Professor Malik activated a small device, and suddenly the chamber filled with images that defied belief. They showed former Council soldiers working alongside humans on massive construction projects, not as prisoners or slaves but as willing partners. Alien families living in human colonies, their children playing together while their parents collaborated on projects that seemed to blend technology and art in ways the Council had never imagined. "This is what we're offering," Malik continued. "Not conquest, but cooperation. Not subjugation, but liberation." The Hive Lord's metal form began to vibrate with what might have been confusion. "You're conducting psychological warfare on a galactic scale." "We're conducting an intervention," Malik corrected. "Your entire civilization is sick, Chancellor. Built on oppression, maintained through fear, expanded through violence. We're offering a cure. Chancellor Valerix's ridges were now glowing so brightly they cast shadows across the chamber. You think you can simply dissolve 3,000 years of order with pretty words and false promises? Not false, said a new voice from the chamber's entrance. Every head turned to see Admiral Thexus's own daughter, Commander Lyra, walking into the chamber wearing a human uniform. Behind her came a procession of other high-ranking council officers, all displaying the insignia of voluntary defection. Lyra? Admiral Thexus's voice cracked with disbelief. What have they done to you? Nothing, Mother, Lyra replied, her voice filled with a peace that Thexus had never heard before. They showed me what it feels like to serve something worth believing in instead of something worth fearing. She activated her own holographic display, showing images from the human fleet. But these weren't military vessels in any traditional sense. They were ships where aliens and humans worked side by side as equals, where decisions were made through discussion rather than decree, where strength was measured by what you could build rather than what you could destroy. They offered me a choice, Mother. We could continue following orders that lead to death and oppression, or we could help build something that leads to life and freedom. Admiral Thexus coiled herself tighter, her form shaking with emotion. You've betrayed everything we stand for. No, Lyra said gently. I've finally found something worth standing for. Professor Malik stepped forward again. This is what's happening across your empire, Chancellor. Not rebellion, but awakening. Your people are remembering what it feels like to hope. The tactical display updated again, showing the cascading effect of defections across council space. Ship after ship, station after station. Entire star systems were declaring independence and requesting human protection. The mighty council fleet was dissolving not through destruction, but through choice. You cannot hope to govern such chaos, General Korath declared, though his voice lacked conviction. We're not trying to govern anyone, Malik replied. We're trying to help everyone govern themselves. Chancellor Valerix stared at the displays showing his empire crumbling in real time. What do you want from us? Malik's expression grew serious. Surrender, Chancellor. Not to us, but to the idea that there's a better way. Join us in building something that serves everyone instead of ruling them. The silence that followed stretched across the chamber like a vast chasm. Finally, Chancellor Valerix spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. And if we refuse? Then you'll wake up tomorrow on a beautiful world where you can live in peace, Malik replied. But you'll never again have the power to hurt anyone. As if summoned by his words, the chamber's walls suddenly became transparent, revealing the human fleet surrounding the council station. Ships that existed in dimensions the aliens couldn't fully perceive, wielding technologies that made their own weapons seem like toys. The age of council dominance was ending, not with conquest, but with conversion. 3 days after the Human Declaration, the Zenthari Collective faced an impossible choice. Empress Naya stood in the bio-neural command center of their greatest hive ship, surrounded by the living walls that pulsed with the thoughts of 10 billion minds. The Zenthari had survived for millennia by thinking as one, acting as one, existing as perfect unity in a chaotic galaxy. Now that unity was fracturing. Show me the situation again, Naya commanded, her thoughts rippling through the neural network. The bio walls shifted, displaying images that challenged everything the Zenthari believed about the nature of reality. Human ships appeared and disappeared without warning, existing in multiple locations simultaneously. Their crews seemed to move through solid matter as if it were air, while their weapons fired energy that didn't just destroy targets, it transformed them into something else entirely. How many of our scout fleets have encountered them? Naya asked through the neural link. 17 direct contacts, responded the collective through 1,000 voices speaking in harmony. 0 casualties reported among our forces. 0 human casualties confirmed. This is unprecedented. What troubled Naya most wasn't the military implications. It was the reports from Zenthari who had survived these encounters. Instead of the trauma and fear that usually followed combat, these scouts returned speaking of experiences that bordered on the mystical. Bring me Scout Commander Trix, Naya ordered. Moments later, a single Zenthari warrior entered the command center. But something was wrong. Trix moved with a fluidity that seemed alien, and when he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that didn't match standard Zenthari vocal patterns. Empress, Trix said, but his greeting felt different somehow, less formal, more personal. Report your encounter with the human forces, Naya commanded. Trix's compound eyes reflected the bio-wall's glow as he accessed his memories. We detected a human vessel in Sector 15. Standard protocol suggested immediate elimination, but when we moved to attack, something extraordinary happened. He paused, searching for words to describe the indescribable. The human ship didn't defend itself. Instead, it opened some kind of communication portal, not technological, but something that connected directly to our neural network. Naya felt a chill run through the collective. Direct neural contact with an alien species was impossible. The Xanthari bio-network was specifically designed to exclude foreign thoughts. That cannot be accurate, she said. I experienced it myself, Trix continued. Their captain, a human named Rebecca Stone, spoke directly into our shared consciousness. But she didn't try to control or manipulate us. She just talked. About what? About choice, Trix replied, and his voice carried an emotion that the collective had never heard from him before. She asked us if we had ever wondered what it would be like to think as individuals while still maintaining our connection to each other. The bio-walls pulsed with alarm as the collective processed this information. The concept of individual thought within a hive mind was heretical, dangerous, potentially destructive to everything they were. She showed us something, Trix continued, seeming not to notice the growing agitation around him. A human neural network that connected millions of individual minds while preserving each person's unique perspective. They achieved unity without losing themselves. Naya felt the collective's unity wavering. Across the ship, individuals in Xanthari were beginning to ask questions they had never thought to ask before. What would it be like to have a private thought? What would it feel like to make a personal choice? This is contamination, the collective declared through the bio-walls. Individual consciousness is chaos. Unity is strength, but what if it isn't? Trix asked, and his question sent shockwaves through the neural network. What if unity and individuality can coexist? What if we've been limiting ourselves all this time? Before Naya could respond, the command center's sensors detected an approaching vessel. But this wasn't a Xanthari ship, it was human, and it was requesting permission to dock. Impossible, Naya said. Our shields are impenetrable. They're not trying to break through, reported the sensor operators. They're asking permission to enter, as if we were equals. The concept was so alien that the collective struggled to process it. In their experience, superior forces took what they wanted while inferior forces submitted or were destroyed. The idea of requesting permission implied a relationship between equals. Shall we destroy them? Asked the collective. Naya hesitated. Military doctrine said yes, but something about Trix's report made her curious. Allow them to dock. I want to see these humans for myself. The docking bay had been designed to intimidate visitors, a vast space that dwarfed most ships, surrounded by bio-neural towers that pulsed with the power of the collective's thoughts. When the human shuttle landed, it seemed impossibly small and fragile against the organic majesty of Xanthari architecture. But when the shuttle's doors opened, what emerged challenged every assumption Naya had about human capabilities. The woman who stepped out moved with the confident grace of someone completely comfortable in alien surroundings. Her dark skin seemed to absorb and reflect the bio-neural light in patterns that suggested some kind of technological integration. When she looked directly at Naya, her eyes held depths that spoke of experiences beyond normal human limitations. Empress Naya, the woman said, her voice somehow carrying directly through the neural network to every Xanthari on the ship. I'm Captain Rebecca Stone. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. How are you speaking through our network? Naya demanded. Captain Stone smiled, and the expression was somehow visible to every Xanthari simultaneously. The same way you're all speaking to each other. Consciousness isn't limited by biology, Empress. It's limited by imagination. She gestured, and suddenly the bio-walls displayed something that shouldn't have existed. A visual representation of human neural networks that spanned across star systems. Individual human minds connected by streams of light, each one maintaining its own unique pattern, while contributing to a vast tapestry of shared consciousness. We learned something important when we developed our neural collective, Stone continued. Unity without diversity is stagnation. Diversity without unity is chaos. But when you combine them properly, you get something that's greater than the sum of its parts. Naya felt the collective stirring with curiosity despite their fear. What do you want from us? Nothing, Stone replied. and the simple honesty of her answer was more shocking than any threat could have been. "We want to offer you something. A choice." The bio wall shifted to show images of human colonies where other species lived and worked alongside humans. But these weren't subjects or slaves, they were partners, each one contributing their unique strengths to collective projects that no single species could have accomplished alone. "You see," Stone explained, "the galaxy is full of species who've achieved amazing things in isolation. But imagine what we could accomplish together." She showed them Xanthari working with humans on projects that combined biological neural networks with quantum consciousness technology. Individual Xanthari who had learned to think private thoughts while still contributing to the collective wisdom. Human researchers who had integrated bio-neural interfaces to experience true hive mind consciousness while maintaining their individual creativity. "This is impossible," the collective declared. "Individual thought destroys unity, does it?" Stone asked. She activated a device on her wrist, and suddenly every Xanthari on the ship could feel something extraordinary. The presence of human consciousness touching their network. But instead of disrupting their unity, it was enhancing it. Through the human neural link, they experienced something the collective had never known, the feeling of billions of individual minds choosing to work together, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The humans weren't unified through biological compulsion. They were unified through voluntary cooperation. "Choice," Stone said softly. "That's what makes the difference. When unity is chosen rather than imposed, it becomes something beautiful instead of something limiting." Naya felt the collective's resistance crumbling. For the first time in millennia, individual Xanthari were beginning to think thoughts that were truly their own while still remaining connected to the whole. "What are you offering us?" Naya asked, her voice carrying new harmonics that reflected her growing individuality. "Partnership," Stone replied. "The chance to become more than you ever imagined possible. Together." As the bio-walls pulsed with the light of 10 billion minds discovering what it meant to choose, Naya realized that the Xanthari were about to evolve beyond their wildest dreams. The Fortress of Eternal Night hung in the void between galaxies, a massive construct built from collapsed star matter and defended by weapons that could crack planets in half. For 2,000 years, it had served as the ultimate fallback position for the Council's most elite forces, a place where the galaxy's greatest military minds could gather to plan their most desperate strategies. Now it served as the last refuge for those who refused to accept humanity's new order. Supreme Admiral Kresh stood in the fortress's central command chamber, his armored form reflected in polished surfaces that had witnessed the planning of 1,000 military campaigns. Around him, the surviving leadership of 17 different species huddled over tactical displays that showed the impossible scope of their defeat. "Status report," Kresh demanded, his mechanical voice echoing off the chamber's reinforced walls. General Voss, his crystalline form crackling with frustrated energy, gestured to the holographic displays. 73% of Council space has declared independence. The humans continue to offer what they call voluntary transition to any remaining forces. Voluntary. Admiral Caney spat, her tentacles writhing with anger. They're using some kind of psychological manipulation. No military force abandons their post without coercion. Commander Rex, the last surviving member of the elite Shadow Guard, stepped forward from the chamber's darker corners. "It's not coercion, Admiral. I've seen the reports from our own intelligence operatives. The humans are showing our people something that makes them want to defect." "What could possibly," Kresh began, but his words were cut off by the fortress's alert system screaming to life. "Contact," reported the sensor operator, his voice tight with fear. "Single vessel approaching. Configuration unknown. It's phasing in and out of reality." Through the command chamber's reinforced viewing ports, they could see it. A human ship that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Its hull reflected light from stars that were light years away, while its very presence caused space-time to ripple like water. "Impossible," General Voss whispered. "Nothing that large should be able to maintain dimensional phase variance." The ship settled into normal space with a sound that somehow reached them despite the vacuum. A harmonious tone that seemed to resonate in their bones. When it fully materialized, they could see that it wasn't just a vessel, it was a small city, complete with gardens, residential areas, and what appeared to be recreational facilities. "They're broadcasting," the communications officer announced. "Put it through," Kresh ordered. The main display activated to show the interior of the human ship, but what they saw challenged their understanding of military command structures. Instead of a sterile bridge dominated by weapons displays, they were looking at something that resembled a combination of garden, library, and art gallery. The captain stood at the center of it all, but she wasn't alone. Dozens of beings from different species worked alongside her, their actions coordinated but not commanded. "Supreme Admiral Kresh," the human captain said, her voice carrying the calm confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "I'm Captain Sarah Mitchell of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. I'm here to offer you one final opportunity to join the galactic community." Kresh felt his combat systems activating automatically. "Captain Mitchell, you're addressing the combined military might of 17 star empires. Surrender now, and your species might survive what's coming." Captain Mitchell smiled, and the expression was somehow visible to every being in the command chamber simultaneously. "Admiral, I think there's been a misunderstanding. You're not our enemy. You're our next project." "Project?" Admiral Kaney's tentacles coiled with confusion. "Rehabilitation," Mitchell explained. "You see, we've learned something important about military cultures like yours. You're not evil. You're just trapped in systems that force you to act against your better nature." The display split to show images from across the galaxy. Former Council military bases that had been converted into research facilities, weapon factories that now produced medical equipment, and everywhere. The sight of former enemies working together on projects that served life instead of destroying it. "This is what we're offering," Mitchell continued. "Not defeat, but transformation. Not punishment, but purpose." Commander Rex stepped forward, his shadow form rippling with agitation. "You think you can simply wish away 2,000 years of military tradition?" "No," Mitchell replied. "We think we can show you something better to fight for." The fortress shuddered as something impossible happened. The human ship began to merge with the massive structure, not through force or destruction, but through some kind of dimensional integration that left both vessels intact while creating something entirely new. "What are you doing?" Kresh demanded, his sensors showing readings that defied comprehension. "Something that should be impossible," Mitchell answered. "We're giving you a demonstration of what human engineering can accomplish when it's focused on building instead of destroying." The command chamber's walls became transparent, revealing that the fortress was now surrounded by a vast garden that somehow existed in the vacuum of space. Trees grew in impossible spirals around living buildings that pulsed with bioluminescent light, while streams of pure energy flowed between structures like rivers of liquid starlight. "How?" General Voss asked, his crystalline form reflecting the impossible beauty around them. "When you stop thinking in terms of limitations and start thinking in terms of possibilities," Mitchell explained. "Your fortress was designed to be impregnable, so we made it into something better, a place where former enemies can learn to become friends." Admiral Kaney's tentacles had gone completely still. "This is some kind of illusion." "No illusion," said a familiar voice from behind them. They turned to see Admiral Thexis entering the command chamber, but she was no longer the same being they remembered. Her serpentine form moved with a grace that spoke of inner peace, while her eyes held a light that hadn't been there during her years of military service. "Thexis?" Kresh whispered. "We thought you were dead." "I was," she replied. "Dead to everything that made life worth living. The humans didn't capture me, Admiral. They rescued me from myself." She gestured to the transformed fortress around them. "This is what they do. They don't conquer, they heal. They don't destroy, they transform. They showed me what it feels like to serve something greater than fear." Captain Mitchell stepped forward, her presence somehow both human and something beyond human comprehension. "Every being in this fortress has a choice, Admiral Kresh. You can continue fighting for a system that serves death, or you can help us build something that serves life." The displays around them showed the final truth. Across the galaxy, former military installations were being transformed into centers of learning and creation. Weapons that had once threatened worlds were being converted into tools that terraformed dead planets into gardens. Warriors who had spent their lives destroying were learning the joy of building something beautiful. "What happens to us?" Commander Rex asked quietly. "Whatever you want to happen," Mitchell replied. "Some of your colleagues have chosen to become teachers, sharing their military knowledge to help others defend against genuine threats. Others have become explorers, using their skills to map unknown regions of space. A few have chosen to become artists, channeling their understanding of strategy into creating works of beauty that inspire others." She paused, looking directly at each of them. "The only thing you can't choose is to continue hurting innocent people. That option has been permanently removed from the galaxy." Supreme Admiral Kresh felt the weight of 2,000 years of military conditioning warring with something he had thought was dead: hope. Around him, his officers were experiencing the same internal struggle, their faces reflecting the dawning realization that they had been fighting for the wrong things their entire lives. "Show us," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Captain Mitchell's smile encompassed them all. "Welcome to the beginning of everything." As the fortress completed its transformation into something that defied description, part ship, part garden, part school, the last military resistance to humanity's vision dissolved not through conquest, but through conversion to something infinitely better. 1 year after the last council stronghold surrendered, the former Chamber of Galactic Judgment had been transformed into something that would have been unrecognizable to its original architects. Where once rigid hierarchies had enforced separation between species, now open spaces encouraged interaction and collaboration. The crystalline walls that had once reflected only harsh authority now glowed with warm light that adapted to the needs of every being present. Ambassador David Cross stood at the center of the Great Hall, but he was no longer alone in representing humanity's interests. Beside him stood former Chancellor Valerix, his once fearsome ridges now marked with patterns that suggested deep contemplation rather than raw power. To his left was Empress Naya of the transformed Zenthari Collective, her bio-neural crown now integrated with quantum processing nodes that allowed her to experience both individual and collective consciousness simultaneously. The assembled delegates represented something unprecedented in galactic history. Not subjects reporting to overlords, but partners gathering to build something greater than any of them could achieve alone. 1 year ago, Cross began, his words translated not just into different languages but into different forms of consciousness itself. This chamber witnessed the end of an empire built on fear and maintained through force. Today, we gather to celebrate the beginning of something that has never existed before, a truly cooperative galactic civilization. The main display activated, showing real-time images from across the galaxy that told the story of transformation beyond imagination. Former Council worlds where species that had been enemies for millennia now worked together on projects that served the common good. Research stations where human neural networks had been integrated with alien consciousness systems to create hybrid intelligences that could solve problems no single species could even comprehend. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Earth's chief science advisor, stepped forward to present the year's achievements. When humanity first declared independence from Council authority, many wondered if cooperation could truly replace conquest as the driving force of galactic civilization. I'm pleased to report that the results have exceeded our most optimistic projections. She gestured to the displays, which showed detailed analyses of the galactic transformation. Crime rates have dropped by 97% across all participating systems, not through increased enforcement, but through the elimination of the conditions that create crime in the first place. When every being has access to education, resources, and meaningful work, the motivations for antisocial behavior simply disappear. The statistics were staggering. Food production had increased by 300% while environmental damage had been reduced to nearly zero. Energy consumption had risen dramatically, while somehow becoming completely sustainable through technologies that treated waste as a resource rather than a problem. Former Admiral Thexus, now serving as Director of Interspecies Cooperation, slithered forward to address the assembly. The most remarkable change hasn't been technological, she observed. It's been psychological. For the first time in recorded galactic history, species are choosing cooperation over competition as their default response to challenges. She activated a personal display showing footage from the joint terraforming project in the Andromeda sector, where 17 different species were working together to transform a dead system into a garden of worlds. What made the images remarkable wasn't the scale of the engineering. It was the sight of beings who had been bred for warfare now dedicating their lives to creation. We've discovered something profound, Thexus continued. Intelligence isn't about dominating others, it's about elevating everyone. Strength isn't about overpowering opposition, it's about helping others become stronger. Captain Rebecca Stone materialized on the platform through dimensional transportation technology that had become routine over the past year. Her presence carried an authority that had nothing to do with rank or title, and everything to do with the respect she had earned through consistent dedication to the common good. The integration phase is now complete, she announced. Every species that chose to join the cooperative has successfully interfaced with the galactic neural network while maintaining their unique cultural and biological characteristics. The neural network she referred to was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, a consciousness-sharing system that allowed any being to experience life from another perspective while preserving their individual identity. The result had been the end of prejudice, racism, and speciesism, not through laws or enforcement, but through genuine understanding of what it meant to be different. More importantly, Stone continued, we've established contact with intelligence networks in 17 other galaxies. The universe is far more populous and diverse than we ever imagined, and they've been waiting for our galaxy to mature enough to join the broader community. This revelation sent waves of excitement through the assembly. The displays showed glimpses of civilizations that operated on scales that dwarfed even their transformed understanding of what was possible. Beings who existed as pure consciousness in the space between stars. Societies that had learned to manipulate time itself as easily as others used basic tools, and vast cooperative networks that spanned multiple universes. Former Supreme Admiral Kresh, now serving as Director of Galactic Security, though his job had evolved from preventing conflicts to facilitating exploration, stood to address the final item on their agenda. The question before us today, he said, his mechanical voice now carrying harmonics that suggested integration with organic consciousness systems, is whether we're ready to take our place in the broader galactic community. The choice was momentous. Joining the intergalactic network would mean access to technologies and knowledge beyond their current comprehension, but it would also mean accepting responsibility for helping other developing civilizations make the same transition they had undergone. Are we prepared to become teachers instead of students? Kresh asked. Are we ready to help other species discover what we've learned about cooperation, consciousness, and the true purpose of intelligence? The discussion that followed demonstrated how far they had all come. Instead of political maneuvering or territorial concerns, the debate focused on practical questions of readiness and responsibility. How could they ensure that their success could be replicated without forcing their specific solutions on species? That might require different approaches. How could they share their knowledge without overwhelming civilizations that weren't prepared for such rapid transformation? Ambassador Cross watched the proceedings with something approaching wonder. These were beings who had spent millennia in conflict, now genuinely concerned about their ability to help others succeed. The transformation was so complete that it sometimes felt like a dream. I believe we're ready, announced Dr. Rodriguez, after the discussion had covered every conceivable concern. Not because we've achieved perfection, but because we've learned how to grow. The vote was unanimous, not through coercion or groupthink, but through genuine consensus reached after thorough consideration of all perspectives. As the assembly concluded, the displays showed one final image. Earth itself, no longer the isolated world that had declared independence a year ago, but transformed into something that served as both home and symbol. The planet pulsed with life that transcended biology, its surface covered with cities that existed in harmony with nature, surrounded by orbital structures that bent space and time to serve the needs of every being who called it home. Today marks Not an end, but a beginning, Cross announced as beings from hundreds of worlds prepared to return to their transformed homes. We've proven that cooperation can replace conquest, that understanding can overcome prejudice, that intelligence can serve life instead of destroying it. He paused, looking around at faces that reflected hope instead of fear. Now let's go show the universe what's possible when different beings choose to work together, instead of tearing each other apart. As the great chamber emptied, the walls themselves seemed to pulse with anticipation for the adventures that lay ahead. Humanity had declared war on the galaxy's empires and won the greatest victory possible. They had transformed their enemies into friends and their conquerors into partners. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun.